Hi, hello, and welcome to another episode of The Dunker Spot. We are part of the Yahoo Sports Network. I am your host, Nekias Duncan, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, the always excellent Steve Jones Jr. Steve, happy Friday. How are we doing?
Feeling good, feeling great. Happy to be here. Excited to be here. Thank you, Dunkers, for once again embracing your bounce. The season is almost over. The playoffs and the play-in are knocking on the door. It's time to continue to talk about hoops. I'm ready to go.
All right, let's have some fun. We're going to talk about some basketball. On Tuesday's show, we went through the top six in the Western Conference and asked some of the biggest questions that we had lingering heading into the playoffs. We're going to do the same thing for the Eastern Conference today before we eventually shift to W News because, oh boy, things seem to be heating up. But we start in the East, and naturally that means we start with the top-seeded Detroit Pistons. 58-22 as of recording. 10th in offense, 2nd in defense, 3rd in net rating per cleaning the glass. And I'll just say before we actually get into the questions, incredibly funny that like the NBA and the NBA PR account has been tweeting out playoff scenarios all week or like leading into the games. And you look at the Western Conference, like, okay, well, Golden State's locked in at 10, and Phoenix may be locked in at 7. OKC and San Antonio just got situated cool. Then you look at the East, and it's like Detroit. That is just it. We know you are the 1 seed, which is a testament to what they've been able to put together this year and what they've been able to put together recently as Kate Cunningham just made his return earlier this week, but what they did without him as well. So I just wanted to salute the Pistons and kind of laugh at how locked in their seeding has been compared to literally everyone else in the Eastern Conference playoff / play-in picture. So that part's cool. With the Pistons being as good as they've been this year, Steve, I don't think I have a ton of questions surrounding the Detroit Pistons. I would say my big picture 10,000-foot view question remains, but like I feel better about it. And that big picture question to me being, what does the non-Kate Cunningham creation look like? And so like, do I think that is solved and I am just 100% locked in on Pistons half-court offense, particularly without Cade heading into the playoffs? No. Do I feel much better about it than I did maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago? I do. We are 2 weeks removed from having an entire Jalen Duren segment because of what he showcased really all year long, but particularly in this Cadeless stretch where the Pistons go 8-3, with 2 of those losses being overtime losses to the Thunder and the Hawks. And Jalen Duren just averages an incredibly efficient 22 points per game, gets to the line a bunch. The face-up drives are there. The way that they continue to feed him on some of these elbow touches and he's able to make decisions as a handoff up, that part's been cool. Dennis Jenkins, as he's had to start in Cade's absence, and again, Cade just came back. Yeah, I'm not scared of anything. I don't mind running a ball screen or running some 2-man action with Jalen Duren. I can attack and transition. Does get a little shot hunty sometimes, but I can make the reads. I can make the plays. It's fine. With Cade out, they had to lean more into their off-ball movement. More Kevin Huerter, which, welcome to the rotation, Kevin Huerter, first and foremost, to zoom all the way out. But more Kevin Huerter, more Duncan Robinson. That part's been cool. So it's just like, I like that I am seeing more attempts. I like that there are more things it feels like y'all are comfortable getting to. You had to with Cade out. But like those are seeds that are being planted. But then I also look back and it's like, okay, during that stretch where they go 8-3 and they open up these different looks and you give Jalen Duren more responsibility, you open up more off-ball stuff, you do more Dennis Jenkins, etc. You zoom out and they were 19th in offense during this span. You zoom out, they were 20th in half-court offense still in this span. And so that's why I can't get all the way to they have answered my questions. I am 100% confident. But I did like most of what I saw. So that is kind of where I'm at with Detroit. Other than that, like I believe in Cade. I believe in Duren largely. I believe in the defense. Them coming out of the East would not surprise me at all. They are the 1 seed. But like that is the one thing that's still kind of looming as we enter the playoffs.
Now, we're gonna talk about your question because I think it's very interesting. But my number one question was, how many series will the Detroit Pistons have to win before people actually believe? And I'm just very curious as to what the Detroit Pistons have to do to really fully gain respect, because it feels like everyone's like, well, we're going to wait for the other shoe to drop, and the other shoe has not dropped. And Cade's been out twice, and they have not been the healthiest team. They've been able, it has not mattered who's in a Detroit Piston uniform. They're going to play Detroit basketball. My thing with your question, right, the non-Cade creation, and I have a question, but I'll try and save it, but I think Detroit doesn't necessarily get credit for what they do offensively. Everyone knows their role. Everyone knows their task. And so when we look at this team, Cade has been really good as far as being able to score the basketball, being able to operate in pick and roll. They can attack in transition because they get stops. But are we respecting the tempo that the Pistons play with? Is it a little bit slower than what you would stamp as a good offense in 2026? Yes. But is there movement? Is there purpose? Is there execution? They have the ability to put people in different positions. And so when you talk about, hey, Dennis Jenkins is doing this with Caden out on the floor, yeah, he turns into an 89 overall when Cade's not there because, yeah, I'm going to be aggressive. But that's kind of the
Mhm.
Pistons ethos. And so when you look at these players, could you be worried about, okay, who can create an advantage outside of Cade? Probably. They may not get a coverage, but are you worried about what they're going to do out there? Do you feel like Tobias Harris doesn't understand his assignment offensively as far as the type of shots he has to make, as far as the type of plays he's involved in, the ways they can use him, slice him in the post? Do you think Duncan Robinson is unaware of his role as far as not only am I going to space the floor, but I'm going to be involved in some of these actions to get a handoff, to create some movement for us? Ditto with Kevin Huerter, as you mentioned. We think Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart don't understand what they're supposed to do. Ron Holland, I'm going to get downhill. Sar Thompson, used everywhere to a degree, as far as there's not exactly one thing that I'm doing, but there's a whole lot of stuff I could do, and we're going to move me around the board. So I think that's where it gets interesting for the Pistons offensively. What are you trying to take away outside of Cade becomes the question for me. And, it kind of ties back into something we discussed where it's like, okay, are you in a playoff setting? You're going to put 2 on the ball against Cade? Does that answer the non-Cade creation question? Because if Cade's creating an advantage basketball for the Detroit Pistons, that's generally a pretty positive thing for them. So how do we balance that out? Is this a team decides, hey, we're going to switch against Detroit and we're going to keep everything flat? And Cade, you got to make a play. Jalen Duren, you got to make a play. I don't think we necessarily respect the flow the Pistons have had offensively. It's not like they're just spamming a certain action. Okay, we run
Right.
things, didn't work, we drive. We drive. We drive. And so
Mhm.
there's a balancing act as far as what a team would want to take away from Detroit in the playoffs. And so I understand like the concerns of saying, hey, 3-point shooting, how many people can really put the ball on the ground? How tough is this team to truly guard because of the belief they play with?
Mhm. No, I think that part's fair, and I think the hidden sauce of the Detroit offense and kind of the half court questions you may have, it's been true season wide, and it was true during the Caitlin stretch. As you can point to, this is where they rank in half court offense, and again, that part has never been super high, hence some of the questions coming in. To your earlier point, they are so good defensively, and they're able to force so many misses and force so many stops. The Detroit Pistons, pretty much all year long, have been very low in terms of what percentage of their possessions are actually in the half court. Like overall this year, lowest half court frequency in the league. During the stretch without Cade, that rises up to fourth, but like that's still a top 5, or I guess technically lower, bottom 5 figure in the league. So like they haven't had to solve that problem as much as other teams. And so I'm right there with you in terms of the flow. This is one of the first things we talked about with the Pistons when JB got there. It's like, okay, the Pistons are playing some pretty solid basketball right now. I like their defense. Quite a bit. This feels like a whole lot of elbow flashes, etc. And they have built on that this year. This is where you see again the Jalen Duren growth in general. So like I love that they do have a level of purpose. And that is again something that stood out during this 8-3 stretch without Cade Cunningham. Like they got 2 different things. Like I'm watching this Orlando Magic game. I guess circling back quickly to the Kevin Huerter point in particular, because I'm just excited to see him playing basketball for Detroit. But it was fun to see him in the Duncan Robinson sets. And also, if those were disrupted, ball finds him again. It's pick and rolls. Like, oh, wait a minute, that's Goga Batate at the level. Like, that is a non-Cade person getting 2 on the ball. And now they're getting to play out of that. They can toss the ball into big at the elbow, get into a split, and they have generated an advantage that way. Like, if they can do that, and they have consistently strong this year going on, like, we have things that we can get to, that's where you feel better about it. But now once you get to the playoffs, it's like, okay, to your point, teams may switch a little bit more, be more physical with them. And this is with or without Cade on the floor. And once you get into the postseason, as reductive as it can be, it matters less if you generated good stuff and more like, did the ball go into the basket? And so,
Mhm.
like, I would like to see the Pistons continue to put the ball in the basket. That's where, again, can point to the frequency is low, the sets are good. That's where them being 20th anyway is where it becomes more of a problem once you get here. Because now it is just you have to do it. Like the results also have to match the process, which is funny for me to say as generally a processed pill person.
Yeah, I'll leave that where it is. But I think it's interesting because I kind of am intrigued because it brings me to my other question as far as what does the defense look like in the playoffs? I think this is a really, really, really good defense. It's a really good
Mhm,
team, obviously. But defensively, we know the Detroit Pistons are going to pressure you. They're going to be physical. They're going to make you earn your points. They have size and length. They're willing to rotate and protect the paint. We know everything about what Detroit wants to do to you defensively. And in theory, with a game plan, okay, yeah, we do this as our base, but now we can hone in and take certain things away and kind of just make it tough on you. The question now
mhm,
becomes is can that scale up in a playoff environment? I think a difficult thing for I don't want to a defense first team to a degree is the fact that
mhm,
that's your calling card. And if a team is able to poke at it, it has a more of an impact. It feels different because okay,
mhm,
we are relying on the fact that we can get stops pretty consistently. And now we're in a tough spot because we're getting dinged a little bit to a degree. And so is a team going to be able to find an action that the Pistons struggle with? Is a team going to be able to put Duncan Robinson or Tobias Harris or Kevin Herter or Kay Cunningham in a certain action, keep Asar Thompson out of it? And now, okay, we're forcing your hand to show help that you may not want to. As good as you
mhm.
are defensively, we're going to put you in a position where you are feeling like you have to double or you have to show help, and we can kind of open things up that way. Does a team find a way to poke at Jalen Duren defensively or Isaiah Stewart and say, okay, how do you feel about this action? Are we able to kind of cycle through? Do you want to put two on the ball? Do you want to be in a drop? Do you want to attack things? Can a team wiggle the Pistons' defensive base just enough to make this into a different type of fight? Is where my mind goes. And that's not saying the Pistons are not able to do things defensively. I think they've been one of the best defensive teams all season. But if I'm on the other side, and I put my coffee down at 8:30 in the coaches meeting. Hey, if we can just kind of get them out of sorts a little bit, wiggle this
Mhm,
around for 36 minutes, now they're in a different fight in this last quarter. So
mhm.
that's where my mind goes to can I take what they've done all year to be elite and twist it up a little bit?
You know, this is another example of why I love doing the podcast with you, Steve. Like, the defense and, like, how can we ding this was something that was also on my mind with this group. And I don't believe there's gonna be a situation where the Pistons go from top 3 defense all year long to we get to a playoff setting, they're performing like the 19th best defense in the league. Like, I just don't see that kind of drop off in any individual series. I have been wondering, similar to the Thunder conversation that we had earlier this week, to where like JB Bickerstaff has been willing to say, "Ooh, teams will put a big on Asar Thompson. We don't like that. You come sit next to me. Ooh, Ron Holland, you have missed your first two corner threes and teams are ignoring you. You come sit next to me." Do we get to a place in the playoffs where they're like, okay, I don't know if we can live with this particular problem and what they're doing to the other guys? And that by default dings the level of the defense or lowers the ceiling of what the defense can get to. And then in terms of particular actions, I am keeping an eye on Jalen Duren because one of the things where we both acknowledge like how much growth he has shown on the defensive end this year, and so I don't want to take that away. But the one thing that I've kind of been, this is interesting to me. I'm going to put this in the file this away for a little bit. Is like anytime there's a level of we're running like wedge action or we're getting into like a ram pick and roll, you got to navigate something and then get back and still stay aware with everything else. Those sequences are where I'm like, ooh, this is still an obvious growth area for Jalen Duren. Like, do I think Duren has to execute a late switch? He can do it. Duren in a drop, he can do it. Duren get up to the level and get out, he can do it. When it's I gotta navigate something and then execute my coverage, and then I gotta get back low and make sure like I gotta cleanse, I gotta make sure this guy isn't roaming around it. When it gets into that, that's where I'm like, ooh, there's still some pockets here for Jalen Duren. And that's where I look at some of these potential play-in matchups or some of these guys that come out to end up being the 8 seed in the East. It's like there are some fascinating pick and roll attacks slash off ball exchanges, off ball screening teams that can poke at Jalen Duren in like the one way that hasn't been like an obvious positive this year. And so I'm glad that you brought that part up because that is also something I was like, he may have to. navigate that. And again, tie it back to the perimeter guys. If this becomes, I don't trust that y'all are going to make shots or teams are mucking up the floor, now you don't have your best navigators alongside Jalen Duren. That puts even more strain on him to do things. So, like, I'm glad that you brought that up, good sir. That's a fun one. That is a fun one. Also, one quick note on the Asar Thompson. Can I just say, as we enter Friday night's action, the fact that he is still one eligible game away from being like awards eligible is kind of frying me. I would like for him to play at least 20 minutes in one of these next 2 games, so he could just be on the all defense first team and probably get some like French depoy love and things like that. But I would just like to see that. Somebody inform the
What's
staff.
the
Make sure
next?
he's 20.
What's the next team we're supposed to talk about?
All righty, we move to the Boston Celtics, second in the Eastern Conference as of recording, second in offense, sixth in defense, fourth in net rating per cleaning the glass. And for me, this Celtics group has been very good all year long. The major question that I had for them earlier in the year was like, man, will they ever end possessions? And they went from one of the worst rebounding teams in the league through the first month and a half of the year to firmly one of the best defensive rebounding teams on top of what they're doing on the offensive glass. So, like, that has largely been answered. Jason Tatum has come back. Jason Tatum has since recently won Player of the Week. He looks more like himself. Jaylen Brown has been very good all year long. I don't have many questions for Boston either.
Okay.
For me, I start with, if I had to just pick one big picture thing, this is a team that leads itself susceptible to shot variance. And like one thing that's kind of permeated through like the Derek White season individually, but with the Celtics as a whole, is like with threes off the particular, they are very willing to take them. They almost always win the volume battle rather. When those pull-ups don't go down, they're not able to set what has been a very good defense as consistently as they can. Now, they have been a good transition defense overall, so I don't want to take that. But just in general, they have been a monster in the half court. They get into different cross match and they can execute different coverages, things like that. And so, like, my broader question is, like, should we be concerned about the pull-up shooting for them as they enter the playoffs? Because that feels like it can be one of, even looking at previous playoff losses for them, New York, Miami, it's been because they've just been flat out outshot. And they still get to the stuff that they want to largely. But those shots don't fall, we're losing the variance battle. Like, that's kind of the big, I have minor things that I'm curious about too. But like, that's kind of the biggest one I have for me. Because the pull-up shooting hasn't, for like Derek White, from Jason Tatum since he's been back. Jaylen Brown's pull-up shooting started at a really high level, particularly in the mid-range. And that's kind of dwindled as the year's gone on, but he's still like good at it. If those shots don't fall and teams switch against them, like, what does that look like? That's kind of the big thing for me right now.
I mean, I think for me with Boston, they've been a very consistent team offensively, defensively. We know what they want to do. Their ability to get the shots for their shot makers, shot takers is ever present. And I think it gets interesting because Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, Peyton Pritchard are going to drive a lot of those attempts. They're going to have a lot of opportunities to score the basketball. How are they getting those shots? Are they generating quality shots? Are they able to score in transition? What's the balance? So I'm not necessarily as concerned about purely pull-up shooting. I'm wondering what the coverages are going to be. Are teams more willing to switch? Are teams more willing to stay at home? Do teams want to show a double or help? Like, there's an interesting battle as far as the Celtics being able to have pressure points that they can hit. As far as Jaylen Brown, he's going to get downhill. Derek White, he can do anything offensively. Jason Tatum, you can use him as a screener. His playmaking has been great since his comeback. You can attack matchups and put teams in a pressure situation. But, can you put yourself in a position where you are able to counter what defenses may throw at you? Becomes interesting because if teams say, hey, we're just going to switch and we're trying to live and we're going to contain, we're going to contest, which player becomes the most important person to take away as far as, hey, let's make Derek White have a tough day. Let's if we take Peyton Pritchard off the board, what do they look like? And so I feel like there's a little bit less of margin for error for Boston in the sense that if one of these pieces fall, are you still generating good looks? Are you still able to kind of balance things out in the half court? It gets interesting. And it kind of points me to one of my questions, my concerns. Is there a chance that Boston leans a little bit too far into mismatches or matchup hunting or pressure points to where, okay, we've bogged ourselves down. We've put ourselves in a position where we want this matchup And this is going to be able to generate good looks for us, and we
Mhm,
can attack and score, or we can, force help and generate a good three. But is that going to take away from our overall attack? And so that's always
mhm,
something that's in the back of my brain with Boston. Not that the process is bad, but it's like,
mhm.
are you going to do this quickly and be able to give yourself a chance to play out of it?
Death, taxes, and Boston Celtics half court tempo questions. We are so incredibly back. When they didn't do it, we looked at the tempo. When they did do it, we were like, hey, the tempo got a little bit better. I love that we're back here. But no, in all seriousness, like I think those are all fair points. I guess a question I want to toss to you as we now enter this postseason: what kind of like scale down do you anticipate from the Jays in relation to each other as we hit the postseason?
What does that mean?
I think because this has largely been not trying to do the narrative whose team is it type beat, but it feels like Jason Tatum is getting a larger share of things as he's gotten more comfortable, etc. And so, like, do we think it's going to settle into Jason Tatum? Is he's initiating more offense as we get into the postseason now? Do we still see like a pretty even split between him and Jalen Brown? So again, not doing the bad narrative, but just in general, do we think we get similar usage from Jason Tatum as we saw like in last postseason run, or do you think it's going to be more Jalen centric to start and they kind of flow from there?
Well, man, I think it depends on who they play, but I think there's a wave effect that Boston has with Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum that allows them both to be aggressive. And with this roster construction, they will have plenty of wiggle room to be able to attack and play off of each other. So that's not a concern for me in this postseason, based on what Boston's
Mhm,
done all year and based on the roster Boston has. They need both of them to be good, and they both have opportunities to put pressure on teams. So I'm not that's not like the anxiety point for me. It's more so, honestly, do you have the right lineup combinations? And what bigs do you trust? And how do you want to guard with your bigs? Because just in the back of my brain, I'm thinking like, and Nekias Keita has been great. Vooch, I think, continues to add to them and can help them in certain matchups in certain scenarios. But
mhm,
you got to remember, Boston is a team that will put a wing on a five, be able to switch everything else, put a big on a non-shooter. Teams are going to counter and put the non-shooter in the action. So what coverages do you want your bigs to hit? Do you have the same amount of versatility defensively with those bigs? Does that put you in a different spot? And so
mhm,
Joe Mazzulla has done a tremendous job of getting his guys ready to go, getting the effort. But now, okay, if I want to put Vooch in action, does that make you feel a little? If I want to put Neemias Queta in action, how many of these is he going to nail? Is that just going to be my pressure point to make you make a decision? And so that's
mhm.
where it's like, okay, in a playoff series, are you going to be able to hit the right notes? I think that's really important for Boston.
I think that's fair. I think two related questions I have bouncing off what you said there, because the rotation is also kind of permeating for me. Because the beauty of this Boston regular season has been we can play a little bit of everyone. They know what their role is. They're going to go 110%. We can get good values, particularly from like the rookies, the young wings, etc. How many slash how much of the young wings do you think we see? Like how much Ugo do you think we get in the postseason? How much Jordan Walsh do we get in the postseason?
I mean, I think the positive for Joe Mazzulla is all those guys understand the assignment and know what they're supposed to do, and he's willing to play them all so he can shuffle the deck a
Mhm,
little bit. Like Baylor Shireman's been great on top of what they do. I think the interesting part is I think when you get to the playoffs, each series is a little bit different for each player. So you may need a piece of, Baylor Shireman's ability to be solid and make shots. You may need Jordan Walsh's just overall versatility and the defense that he brings. You may need Hugo to be active and pressure teams. So I think it's more so tightening the rotation, getting the attempt, and understanding, okay, this may not be your series. I can pivot elsewhere. So I think Boston has a little bit of an advantage knowing their roster and what they can bring to the table, but it's just going to be
mhm.
fine tuning it in a pressure situation.
I feel you. I feel you. Last one I have for you, based on the big question that you particular. Do we see a legitimate ramping up of Jason Tatum at the five in this
Uh,
postseason run?
I would not be surprised if they mix it in. I think the if you're Boston, you want to be in a world where that's something we can go to, but we don't have to go to make this work.
Mhm.
That's your ideal scenario. And so we want to be in a situation where we're doing these changes out of a position of strength, if possible, as opposed to complete reaction and okay, we can only operate playing small. And so that's where it gets very interesting. So I think Boston's ability to do different things defensively, to play small, to have bigs that work, they can throw a lot of things on the table. It's just going to be what matchups, what are we trying to attack, what are we trying to take away, and what does that do for our team?
Okay. I like it. I like it. Again, that's pretty much the major stuff that I had on the Boston front. Like they've been pretty ironclad on both ends. So we can move to the New York Knicks, currently the third seed, 52-28 as of recording, third on offense, ninth on defense, fifth in net rating per cleaning the glass. And I think kind of similar to the Detroit conversation, like I've had a big picture question that I felt better and worse about at different points of the season. But it starts with Karl Anthony Towns for me and how often and how consistently they can unlock him, which is why I am glad for those questions in a vacuum, but also for the purposes of this podcast. We've had Knicks against the Atlanta Hawks, potential playoff opponent, and then the New York Knicks against the Boston Celtics, who could be a second round matchup if they win their first round matchup. And getting to see the Cat Brunson two-man game pop the way that it has, and some of the problem solving that's been attached to these two has been why are you already emoting? Has been fascinating to me, and it has been encouraging to me because we watched that Hawks Knicks game earlier this week, and we did the live stream afterward. We talked about a lot of the ways that Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns were unlocked, high pick and rolls, how high they were operating their actions. Cat is a hub, some of the pass and catch or pass and cut between Cat and Brunson. It's like, okay, I like this. We get into the Celtics matchup, and I am thinking, cool, we're going to see Jason Tatum on Cat. We're going to see Nekias Kato on Josh Hart, and we're going to see how they have to work through this again. And we didn't see that to the same volume, or at least to the volume that I thought we were going to see it. It was sprinkled in a little bit later, or as the game went on. I was like, okay, this is more Cat being defended by a five. They are getting right back to Cat as a hub, high pick and roll between Brunson and Cat. It's like, I like what I am seeing here. And they're doing so while Josh Hart's still in the starting lineup, to where teams have a very obvious, let's put our center here point. Can they maintain that consistency in that particular lineup? Because I think if you're able to
I
fully unlock Cat and thus unlock the Brunson Cat thing, you just feel a lot better about the playoff ceiling of this group offensively.
Here's the thing. I don't think it's about a level of consistency. And I remember a time where you were just putting stats out there about how bad the Jalen Brunson Cat two-man game was. You have to understand, if you're sitting there and wondering, well, why is this all of a sudden working? Why is Mike Brown just running this more now? In these two matchups, they had Karl Anthony Towns against a center. That is the most important piece. Karl Anthony Towns against a big is a different Karl Anthony Towns because he is now able to unlock things. That big is, unless if they're not switching, which we did not see a ton of in the Hawks and Celtics game, although they mixed it in and Jalen Brunson was able to kind of make the bigs pay it sometimes.
Mhm.
Cat now is able to be a roller in pick and roll and force the weak side to help. He's able to pop in pick and roll and make you pay that way with a shot or a drive. He is unlocked. And when he is unlocked, you have more options to the Knicks defense. And so, I mean, the Knicks offense, sorry. But I think if that's the biggest thing between the Brunson Cat two-man game. And that's why the numbers have been so bad, because teams said, I don't want to see this. So here is a
Mhm.
wing Karl Anthony Towns. We will switch, and you are going to have to get this out of an elbow touch or a post up, or you're going to have to space the floor and hope that you go double big and Mr. Robinson rolls and you get shots out of it. That is the
Mhm.
dynamic. And so it's been very interesting this week in particular to watch New York understand the assignment to a degree and see that the Hawks were not going to like make the Hawks shuffle through coverages, by the way, because they did do that
Mhm.
between Brunson and Cat.
Yeah.
We talked about it, but like, hey, we're going to make you try and force this to one side. We're going to make you put two on the ball. We're going to make you be in a drop. We're poking at that. Boston, okay. I expected them to put Tatum on Cat to start. They didn't. They, hey, we're going to do a little surveying. We're going to see what you want to do if you want to attack it. And it was interesting to see Mike Brown like, oh, that's a big on Cat. Let's tap
Let's
into
go.
this a little bit. And
Mhm.
the Knicks have explored just kind of having two screeners near half court, as far as it could be Mitchell Robinson and Cat, and be Josh Hart and Cat for Jalen Brunson, and just exploring space. throwing things ahead and letting Jalen Brunson get downhill. If Jalen Brunson gets traditional coverage and Cat gets traditional coverage, it opens things up to a degree. And so how many teams are going to be willing to get that? And are the Knicks going to be intentional with finding a way to get Cat against a big, right? And I think there was an interesting point against Boston where, hey, Boston was kind of back and forth. Do we want Kata? Do we want Tatum on Cat? What do we do? And then we go to, what everyone likes to call ram pick and roll, but like a pin down for Cat into a pick and roll. Boston didn't want to give the switch, but of course, these days, if an offense doesn't want to give a switch, okay, well, we'll just bring the other guy up anyways and get the action we want. And so is Mike Brown going to tap that button to have the counters and be intentional with, I want to get some off-ball movement to get this matchup, so now I can get this between Cat and Jalen Brunson? That, to me, feels like the biggest question.
That was a play that I had indexed as I was watching that game back. And it popped immediately. Like, one, I chuckled while it was happening because Jalen Brunson is barking out instructions to Josh Hart, and it felt like Josh Hart just did not hear him for the first 5 seconds of the possession. So just very aggressive pointing and signaling from Jalen Brunson at the beginning of that. But then, as you mentioned already, like, okay, I'm going to screen for Cat. Are we switching this? Are we not? Tatum eventually, then you bring Cat up later. And it turns into high pick and roll. And like the other part of this, like, one, I just love that problem solving, though it could have went a little quicker if Josh Hart knew I need to get down there earlier. The pass that Jalen Brunson threw is not a pass that Jalen Brunson throws super often. And I remember early in the year, we were talking about Jalen Brunson against two on the ball in general, and that the Knicks have been pretty intentional about making sure there's someone on the wing for him to give you the early release pass, and that guy can drive or make the pass from there. Jalen Brunson is someone that he's capable of throwing like the weak side skip, but it isn't something that he does super often. He's also not forcing the issue with like a dart against two into the paint. And so the fact that he hits Josh Hart on that cut from the wing, not with a pocket pass, but with like a legit laser. One, Josh Hart didn't feel like he was ready for that pass. Ball was at a bit ultimately gets the layup, but it's like they're doing the good process to get Cat a matchup with a 5 with some pre-screening. And then Jalen Brunson's also making a read against tendency to unlock something at the end of the clock. And it's like if they can bottle that, doesn't have to make that pass every time because that's just not going to be available every time. But if he's willing to do it, that opens up a little bit more. And if they're willing to do all the stuff that led to that pass, you just feel a lot better. I am intrigued by what that portion is going to look like. Like I had pick and roll stats. I think it was showing up a little bit earlier at the beginning of April. Cited like this is what Brunson and Cat are doing against switches in particular, and they were very bad against switches. So like that is still something that they're going to have to solve if teams default to. Okay, we are just going to put a wing here. That's where, again, more the problem solving to make sure Cats gets a 5, or Cat or Brunson just has to punish the switch more than they have been overall so far this year. They're capable, they're skilled enough to do so, but they are going to have to do it. And as I was looking at just some of the general lineup stuff with, go ahead.
No, continue.
Okay. Oh, but no, that's I was looking at some of the general lineup stuff with Cat because I posed the question earlier this week or earlier this month rather. It's like, hey, at what point do the Knicks decide, in light of teams just putting big on Hart, wing on Cat, do we get any kind of lineup tweak heading into the postseason? Or once we get there, are they eventually going to decide, okay, we are starting someone else instead of Josh Hart because of teams just consistently doing this? One, if they perform like they did against Atlanta and some of the problem solving we saw against Boston, they may not need to, but it is worth noting, per Clean the Glass, there are 38 lineups that have logged at least 300 possessions. The Knicks starting lineup with Hart in 30th in net rating, not great. You look at the pick and rolls between Cat and Brunson when Hart is on the floor versus when they aren't. The switch rate drops tremendously when Hart is not on the floor because teams can't really afford to put their big on a non-shooter to the same degree. That is still something I'm monitoring at the very least. But
before we throw the break, I would just say you got to understand the potential of something to be good, even if statistically it's not going great or it's not having the same amount of success. That lineup is probably the best version of them defensively to a degree if everyone hits the right notes. Offensively, if we can put ourselves in a pressure situation where teams are having to react to what we do, we solve a lot of things. They're going to have to deal with switching. They're going to have to poke at teams. But in this postseason environment, this is where, as an offense, I just need to do enough to get a defense to think that's a bad idea. let's not do that. And if you're a defense, I just need to do enough to make an offense say, well, we can't attack that. Let's pivot somewhere else. That's the
Mhm.
heart of playoff basketball to a degree, is just the back and forth and the chess game of you don't necessarily feel as comfortable about this, or we figured something out and you know how to solve this problem very quickly.
Mhm. No, I think that is very much fair, good sir. We're going to take a break there. And when we return, we talk about seeds 4 through 6 in the Eastern Conference and some of the questions that we have with them heading into the postseason. Stay tuned. And we are back with this episode of the Dunker Spot. We continue our trek through the Eastern Conference playoff standings. We are now at the 4th seed, the Cleveland Cavaliers. So many injuries and roster changes and things, and 51 wins for the Cavs heading into the weekend. 51-29, 7th in offense, 14th in defense, 9th in net rating per cleaning the glass. We did just do a big Cavs episode with a pair of excellent guests last Friday. So check out that full episode to get a full picture of Cleveland Cavaliers thoughts. But just to kind of bounce off of that conversation and to continue this one ultimately, biggest question for me surrounding the Cleveland Cavaliers non-health division is simply, will they hit the right lineup notes to make the run that they are capable of? Because we have gotten, I think, 92 minutes of Mitchell, Harden, Mobley, and Allen on the floor together. And they have won those minutes by a lot of points. And I was intrigued earlier this week. They played the Atlanta Hawks, and they pretty much have a fully healthy group. And Dean Wade is the starter at the fifth, is the fifth starter rather. And now that group is plus 30 in 33 minutes together, which is insane. They are shooting 52% from three in those minutes. So like that is going to decline. And teams are not going to shoot as poorly from three as they have so far in those minutes. But a lot of collective size 3 through 5. Harden and Mitchell can split the playmaking duties. The sub patterns in that game allowed them to flow into Dean Wade at the 4 to alleviate some of the backup 4 concerns and things. And so I was like, okay, this is interesting. And so broadly speaking, like, can they mix and match enough? Because you saw Wade at the 4, you saw like some Keon Ellis at the 4 with other guards. It's like, can they mix and match the double big and single big lineups enough and find the right offense defense balance within those lineups to punish this team? From a pure talent perspective, they have enough talent to get out of the Eastern Conference. They have to stay healthy. They have to execute, of course. But how they tap into their lineup versatility and win is going to loom very large over any potential run that they can make.
Yeah, again, I would recommend listen to our podcast last week with the Chase Town podcast as far as breaking down the Cavs. But I think it ties in. You have more lineup versatility to a degree. You have more optionality, which is good for you in the playoffs. Do you overtinker? Do you know where you want to go? Are you doing this because of what you want to do offensively and defensively, or are you doing this because what you're trying to take away from a team or reacting to what they do? And so I think that's the curious point about this stretch going down the end of the season is being able to mix in, okay, James Harden's at the 4. We have multiple guards out here. We know Sam Merrill can open our playbook. Dean Wade's screen navigation is very important. We can go double big. We can have one big. We can be elite in that territory. We know Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis can cause chaos. Jalen Tyson, hopefully you come back, you add to that. Do you have enough of a knowledge of what you have to say we need this now, this will do this for us, or are you tinkering in the playoffs? It's one thing to tinker and experiment in the regular season, but in the playoffs, you want to have a certain level of certainty or an understanding. I need to accomplish this goal or solve this problem. This lineup will do it for us. So that's to me an interesting thing for me to watch as far as where do they want to go? How long do they want to stick with different combinations? Because in the Atlanta game, you saw, again, like James Harden, we got 3 other guards, we got 1 big out there. Okay, let's put James Harden on a big, and let's put our big on a non-shooter, and let's see what you do with that. So I think a lot of experimentation from Cleveland leads you to questions about them during this stretch, but that could pay off in the playoffs. My mind goes to the bigs to a degree. Jared Allen, that Atlanta game, it was very interesting. He had the mindset, and he's been very good. We talked about it last week, but he's been very good and been very aggressive. But he had the mindset of like, I would like to dunk every basketball. And when that didn't work, he was like, well, let me get to some of these pump fakes and finish in the middle. They need Jared Allen to be really good offensively and aggressive. They need him to hold up defensively and be able to execute different things. And then for Evan Mobley, he's going to have to be aggressive. He's going to have to be really good defensively. And then when he's going to have to space the floor. And so there are going to be opportunities with Cleveland when you have Donovan Mitchell playing at this level, when you have the brain of James Harden, his ability to bend defenses. There's going to be opportunities where, hey, James Harden draws help, kick to Donovan Mitchell, that draws help, kick to whoever's out there, that draws more help. The last pass goes to Evan Mobley. Is that a win for the defense or the offense? So that's likely where I'm at.
Okay, I think that part's fair. One question that I'll sprinkle in that I don't think we touched on a ton in the episode last week, and again, check that out for full Cavs talk. Do you have, I think it's easy to poke at, hey, teams might put Harden in action in some kind of way, which is where the cross match against Atlanta was super interesting to me. And we're going to talk a lot more about that as we get to Atlanta. Do you have any concerns about Donovan Mitchell being put in action as we enter the postseason?
I mean, it's always been a question mark, and it's been something teams have been willing to do against Cleveland. I think having Harden allows them to kind of level the heat to a degree. Because before, when it was Garland and Mitchell, it's like, we're putting both y'all in action. It doesn't matter. One of y'all come here. We're good. If James is big enough to handle a matchup and we take James off the table, does that turn into more Donovan? Does Donovan handle it well? And now they decide we can't attack Donovan. Like, I think there's a little bit more wiggle room for Cleveland because of the size of James and the things they can kind of do.
Okay. Like, I was thinking about that because, like, I think Donovan on the ball has generally been fine, like, even zooming out this past Cavs year, because he's someone that's going to compete shorter guard, but like massive wingspan, strong in the chest, all the things. I've been kind of thinking back in my head, like, do we hit the postseason, regardless of who their opponent is? And they're just like, yeah, we're going to poke at Donovan Mitchell by putting you in the weak side corner. We're going to make you make low man decisions. Because if there's one thing that you can poke at with Donovan Mitchell, he can get a little lackadaisical or over aggressive when making off ball decisions. Is there a way, to your point about like what they did with Garland and Mitchell, now that we have Harden and Mitchell, you're putting Harden on the big, we get you to switch out, now we have Harden guarding the action, Mitchell's in the weak side, and now it's this traditional pick and roll with Harden having to navigate, plus Mitchell may have to do some stuff. Like, is that some more of moving forward is a thought that's kind of been circulating for me. But it's a good team. They're on a run right now. I am fascinated by this. We can move to the Toronto Raptors, Steve, who, as of recording, 45-35, 12th in offense, 7th in defense, 11th in net rating per cleaning the glass. I have a lot of questions about the Toronto Raptors, and I think to narrow it down, I kind of starts with the stars. I think there's just a level of productivity that you need from Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram. And boy, did Brandon Ingram light up the Miami Heat last night. And in general, the Raptors just flat out sweeping the Heat during the regular season series when those matchups are always nonsensical between those two, no matter what the personnel is. That's a feather in the cap for the Raptors, and it certainly helps them get closer to solidifying a playoff spot versus a play-in spot. So quick salute there. We are not talking Heat on this pod, thank goodness. I do not have kind thoughts right now. But in relation to the stars and Scotty Barnes in particular, will he find the balance that he needs offensively? And related to that, how can the Raptors ecosystem further unlock him and help him find the balance easier? Because I think the best version of Scotty Barnes offensively is going to be him in transition, either forcing a turnover or grabbing a miss. And now he either gets to push and attack early or somebody else grabs the board. He is streaking down the floor and he's putting some poor unsuspecting defender underneath the basket for a quick seal. The half court, it is always kind of oscillated in terms of the effectiveness with him this year. And as he's kind of shifted more on ball as of late, he had the 5-game streak where he had 10 plus assists. But within that, it's like, hey, you are kind of passing up some shots. Some of these drives aren't as aggressive or as fruitful as we are accustomed to. And that's before getting into some of the baked in issues that you have with Scotty as a primary initiator, just handle burst, things like that. And so I'm just kind of wondering what the on-ball, off-ball balance is going to be for him, what the lineups are going to look like to make sure that you just cannot wall off the paint against Toronto and thus Scotty Barnes and thus limit the effect that is there. And like, what do any of the two-player actions between Scotty and Brandon Ingram look like in a postseason setting? Because if you can find enough between those two, we're coming off of the Boston conversation where you mentioned there's a wave effect to where you can start with Jason Tatum and flow into Brown or vice versa. the Raptors have some elements of that with some of the duck ins and late drives for Scotty and Brandon Ingram on opposite sides. But like in general, I would like to see more synergy between the two in the half court. Because I think if they can score enough, I trust the defense still. But Scotty's role is going to loom very large over whatever potential Toronto has in a playoff setting.
I mean, to go quick, I think it's just okay. How our defense is going to treat Scotty Barnes, and does he make them pay for their decision that they made? I think that's the biggest thing. Can he become someone who has made enough plays to where, okay, I have now posted up this matchup. You got to show help and make a different play, make a different read. I think with Brandon Ingram, there's a comfort with his bucket getting as far as if Brandon Ingram does X, the defense will react to Y. We know that, and so for Toronto, I feel like it's got to be a little bit of everyone has to contribute to a high degree. Emmanuel quickly has to be someone who is making a defense pay. RJ Barrett has to be a connective piece. The defense has to play at a certain level. Like I think for Toronto, it's not that they are not a good team. I think they just have less of a wiggle room factor when it comes to a playoff series, and that our defense can't really get hit to a certain degree. We can't have Scotty Barnes playing a non-aggressive. We need the Brandon Ingram scoring. We need Emmanuel quickly aggressive. We need RJ Barrett driving and making plays. Like they need certain things to become who they are, as opposed to some of these teams where, okay, if we don't have this, we can pivot to this. It's not that Toronto doesn't have talented players. It's that it's very clear their base relies on all of those guys firing to a certain degree. And so I think with Scotty Barnes, it's just like, okay, it's not that Scotty Barnes is not a talented player. It's that if I'm a defense, switch, make a play, make me think that you will do something else. RJ Barrett, make a play, make me think that you do something else. What's your flow like, Toronto, in the half court after we defend our first option? How are you going to handle that? And then the nights that you are not doing well defensively, what are you going to do about that? That is the balance for Toronto. And so I credit them for the start of the season, figuring things out, climbing back into the playoffs late in the season. But it's now time for you to look in the mirror and do this meme and figure out what you want to do.
Oh God, you are unserious. I just say quickly on the Scotty front, and then we can move forward. Like there has just been, I think, baked into the offensive waxing and waning of his aggressiveness. Some of that is him. Some of that is the personnel around him. Which broader question is just like which wings are going to pop in a postseason setting for Toronto? Like, when's the last time we talked about Grady Dick, for example? Like the spacing in general for Toronto has just been kind of wonky, or teams are just comfortable helping off a lot of guys for them. So like who's going to make impact in that wing room? But tied to the aggressiveness waxing and waning for Scotty is that he has to do so much on the defensive end for them. Guard so many different types of people, has to extend the pressure as high out. And it's like you're asking me to pick up 70 feet from the basket, and then on the other end, you want me to put up 20 shots and get to the line seven times and also be our best playmaker. That's not the most fair burden to place on someone. Now, heavy is the hair that wears the crown as like the best player on the team, max contract, etc. But like, it's not an easy job that he's having to navigate. So I do, to your point, the defense got to take pressure off of Scotty defensively with some of the lineups and still find enough offense, find enough spacing to where they can get into the flow. Because like schematically, Darko has always run good stuff for Toronto. Teams just largely have not cared based on who's been on the floor. So like, how can they execute enough? How can they find enough to get there? That's where I am at with Toronto. We can now move to the Atlanta Hawks, Steve. Also 45 and 35, 15th in offense, 8th in defense, 12th in net rating. And I jotted this down as we were watching the game on Monday, and we eventually did like the post-game stream. Check that out if you want to get our thoughts there as well. And as I'm watching that game, and as I cycle through like the early Tony Bradley minutes, and then you get into Mo Gay as your backup five, and as you flow later in the week, they still are mostly working with Mo Gay as your backup five because Jock Landale got injured and is in a boot. Not sure when we're going to see him return with the ankle injury that he served. Onyeka Okongwu is not Atlanta's best player. I do kind of wonder if he is the most important player to them making any sort of run. One, because of the many things that he can do on both ends of the floor. But tied to that is that when he is not on the floor or if he is not playing well, their options are dire in a way that is kind of uncomfortable if you are projecting the ceiling for Atlanta in a playoff setting. Like, the Hawks have a lot of wings and fours to cycle through, and they have different guards they can cycle through. At the center position specifically, it's Onyeka, and then it's a massive drop off. And then schematically, it's a massive drop off in like what you can do with those guys compared to what you could do with Onyeka, to where he's been so effective as kind of like a trail option in their offense. They can throw in the handoffs, can attack above the break, can knock down above the break threes. Defensively, you can ask him to defend different types of positions, can switch all over the place. And so, is Onyeka kind of the key to them making a run? Is a question that's been swirling around my head now.
I don't think so. Not that Onyeka Okongwu is not talented, but I think part of that is how willing is Quinn Snyder and his staff to go small and dip into the size of a Jonathan Kuminga, the size of a Zachary Ricochet, and have a different optionality to where, okay, Onyeka does this. Maybe we don't have a big, but maybe we can junk things up for a few minutes and feel good about our offensive attack. Are you willing to dip into that bag in the playoffs? That becomes interesting to me. I think the Hawks, it's been a fascinating week for them as far as having the Knicks matchup, having the Cavs matchup. We've seen the good from the Hawks with their pace and their tempo, and they put pressure on you. And they're a team that they're not the Pacers from last year, but boy, they drew some inspiration from them as far as, hey, we're not out of this. We can find a way to get stops. We'll get out and transition and run. And maybe we didn't score for 3 minutes, but we just scored 10 points in 2 minutes. And you got to deal with us. You know what I mean? We're going to get the, you want to bog us down in the half court? That's fine. What if we're not in the half court? What are you going to do about that? What are you going to do about those moments? And so they have kind of an up and down balance where if I'm a team, I want to be physical with them. I want to take away your off ball movement. I want to make sure you're late in the clock. I want to pressure you. I want to put pressure on you in the half court. And I'm going to attack you on the other end. At the same time, if you're not scoring and they now get a chance to run and they will get shots up. So I think as important as Onyeka is, they need CJ McCollum scoring. They need Nikhil Alexander-Walker to keep this up. They need Jalen Johnson to be unbothered by how teams treat them and be able to drive and finish. They need the totality of their team to lift everything up.
Mm-hmm. And this has been an interesting week for Jalen Johnson as well, to where you're looking at some of the physicality that he's seeing, some of the switches that he's seeing. I've been encouraged by him. Like, teams are gapping him when he's spaced on the perimeter. He's taking threes in rhythm. Like, I like that portion of the program. But like, they need the drives from him in the half court. And if teams are comfortable just like sitting on those and helping all elsewhere, that does lower the ceiling of what he can do in these kind of settings, which then bleeds to the offense. And then something that we saw very early on in that Knicks matchup, and we also saw in the Cleveland matchup, like, yeah, we're just going to cross match. We're going to have a big on Dyson Daniels. I have largely liked the way that the Hawks have handled that gambit this year, to be clear. I think they haven't had much issue flowing into Dyson as a hub or a decision maker, or just quick pitch, I want to screen for you and things like that. And again, late in possessions, he can still dart down and get offensive rebounds for you. But boy, did it feel extra audacious this week. And the thing that really caught my eye, particularly in the Cleveland matchup, is like, oh, we're starting to see some of these record scratches from Dyson again, to where he's wide open. He's thinking about, ooh, do I want to shoot this? Do I need to flow? And like that instantaneous nature of making whatever decision it is, that's starting to do in those. Like, the Hawks cannot afford for that to pop back up. It largely hasn't this year, but I saw elements of that this week where I'm just like, ooh, if that goes backwards at all, that further complicates what the Hawks can do in the half court offensively, which is where I've always been kind of keeping an eye on what do they look like against switches, what do they look like against physicality, to where they aren't just able to kind of get flow based to get everyone involved, like the best version of themselves. If you're tossing and cross matching on top of that, and you're also working later in the clock because you're turning down shots, it's been more perilous for them. So I am, I guess, broadly curious about the offense, but again, Onyeka looms pretty large for me. Please subscribe if you haven't already. We are on Apple, Spotify, RIP Google, Stitcher, Podbean, wherever you get your podcasts, you can find us. Subscribe to the Yahoo NBA YouTube channel and the Yahoo Sports YouTube channel. If you have not already, you can follow me on socials at Nekias NBA. You can follow Steve on socials at Steve Jones 20. And with that, we got a fun weekend ahead. NBA basketball. We got the W draft coming up. We got more free agency stuff. We got a lot to react to next week. Enjoy your weekend, friends.